All right, welcome everyone. My name is Christine Brindza, and I'm the Senior Curator and James and Louise Glasser Curator of Art of the American West at the Tucson Museum of Art. This is a series called Cookies with the Curator, where I have conversations with artists, colleagues, and other arts professionals. And what better way to talk about art than starting with a cookie? Today, my guest is Karen Kitchel, a California artist whom I've had the pleasure of working with over the past several years. Welcome, Karen.
Hi, Christine. Hi, everybody.
We're glad to have you today. So, since this is Cookies with the Curator, let's start with our love of sweets. What kind of cookie do you have today?
This is a staple in my studio refrigerator. It's a Petit Écolier, a little dark chocolate-covered shortbread with a picture of, I think, a schoolboy on it. Fantastic.
Mmm, sounds good.
And
Yeah,
crunchy.
finger licking good, right? And I guess you have coffee to wash it down?
Yes, it's cool in Ventura today, only in the
Oh,
mid-60s. So
oh, nice. It's a little cooler than Tucson right now.
I bet.
So, well, I have today a lemon cookie. I was thinking of you and your gardening and how much you are, about the different fauna and florals of the world. And so I thought, what an appropriate cookie to have with Karen. So,
Good choice.
so yes, as we can always talk about cookies. It's just one of those things that we love to do, but we're also here to talk about art. And I'd like to hear a little bit from you about what kind of work you do, some tidbits from your background, anything you would like to share with us.
Well, this is an odd time to be talking about art. I don't know if you'll be distributing this chat while we're all still in quarantine, but that's where I've been for the last 3 months. So some chapters of my past are coming back into the open that I haven't visited in a long time. And one of those is my love of not just gardening, but botany, trying to engage with and understand the complexities in the botanical world, and in the case of home gardening, solving the problems. I keep an organic garden at my house, and here in the studio, I tend to use botanical images as actual, as I would say, actual characters in a drama, not a background as many landscape artists might. When I get going down deep into the dirt and deep into the meaning of landscape work, I'm trying to show nature with specificity, nature with a personality. And these months of lockdown have been bringing me to some very strange places as to what kind of personality nature might have.
Right, right. And I think many artists are going through something similar. What do we do now?
Right. And for me, I'm not making coronavirus art specifically, but I think that one of my underlying themes of Mother Nature as not just something or someone under siege, but something that might be quite irritable and striking back, that is, going through my mind right now. How could it not? We're definitely, as human species, on the receiving end of trying to figure out a very complicated situation that has occurred without our choosing, without our permission. So I'm thinking a lot about that, and I'm not sure what the final impact of this time will be on my work, but the work is getting bigger, it's getting rougher. Um, the more tidy my garden is becoming, the looser and more out of control things in the studio are becoming. So I'm sure there are some relationships there that are not
Oh.
all random.
Yeah, what an interesting observation you're making on how that balance is really changing.
I've been spending more time in the garden than in the studio, really. Part of it has to do with just what's going on in different parts of the town. But I'm finally getting to address my garden in a big picture way rather than giving it the leftover time. So my garden is perfectly mulched, the paths are edged, things are divided, the row covers are on the plants. Things look great there. But in the studio, there's lots of piles of half-addressed thoughts all over my space, which is a 1,500 square foot space. So I have ample space, but it really feels like it's turning into its own maze. So my sense
Oh,
of order is sort of swapping right now.
oh, okay.
Studio, messy, garden, tidy. It's all about control, right?
That's right. Yeah, your creative process is kind of changing, I assume too, because if you're used to being more tidy in the studio and now you have these partial thoughts going on, I think that's what a lot of people have with, just how they're dealing with things, that there's just a lot of um, partial thoughts happening, like you start and stop.
Start and stop, and partial relationships. One thing that's occurred to me that I haven't got to talk to a lot of people about this yet, but that old question, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there, does it make a sound? I'm definitely reassessing and I guess just musing. I haven't reached any conclusions, but what is the purpose of art? What does art say if no one can see it? If only I am engaging with it for an unknown period of time,
Yeah.
what does that then mean for me, for the artist, for you, for people that are used to being in this circular, in back and forth relationship with the artwork? So I won't say I've given up, but I'm definitely reassessing. It's very different. I've had some wonderful things be canceled. The voice in my head that I live with in the studio is taking up a lot more space than she usually does.
Oh,
So
I see. Yeah. Yeah. But you've had such a prolific career, if you don't mind me saying that word. But, and just following your work with, especially when you were doing your grasses, um, how has that impacted your change in what you're looking at now, in your various, you know, botany images?
my without being able to name it at the beginning, I can now look back in time to some of those works you're mentioning, and I can see that my effort has been to try and put nature and the meaning of nature in the forefront rather than myself as the beholder of the landscape in the forefront. So with the grasses, I'm trying to bring the minute differences of the specimens literally, up into your face, so that we need to, or at least have a chance to, encounter these individual nuances in a very small series of specimens.
Okay.
Now I'm working from actual picked leaves and things from my own garden situation, but I'm extrapolating them into more of an imaginative and a mythological scale and meaning, where I'm referencing narratives or making up narratives. based on, a very little fragment. So in the grasslands, I'm taking a huge landscape and showing you a fragment. And right now, I'm literally bringing in maybe a leaf or two from a bean plant. And, this is what we're getting.
Wow.
So this painting is sewn on burlap bags that I got from the Thomas Fire. They were just sandbags, and they're all stitched together. And this particular piece, which is called the Three Sisters, is almost 11 feet high by over 16 feet wide. And it's one of a multiple group of gardens that I'm planning, painted gardens.
Wow. Can I just say, from that little glimpse, I am excited about that piece.
Oh, good. So, I started, of course, because my own garden, I have the classic Native American New World garden, corn, squash, beans, but, one's mind does wander. And I've learned since that Three Sisters also refers to the three Furies, the Greek goddesses, the daughters of Gaia, who basically wreak havoc on human men that have broken their vows to the earth and to nature. So things like that are carrying me far away right now.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. So many connections that you can make. Yeah. So how about we talk a little bit about the piece that we have in the Tucson Museum of Art collection? We did allude to your grasses, and this is one of those pieces from when you were working on that. And so what I'm going to do is pull up the image. Excuse the color. In person, this piece is a lot more amazing.
It's a lot of little parts to be on our little screens right now.
It is. But this piece we received a few years back in our collection, and it's called Hiss. And what it is, for those who may not be familiar, it is 9 by 24 panels. And so these are individual panels put together in a grid. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about this piece?
Well, we're closing a circle here, Christine, which is pretty interesting. This piece was inspired during a group of experiences when I was in residency in Wyoming at the UCross Foundation. So another sequestered period, only under happier circumstances. It was a day of very depressing news. The artists in residence all have individual studios at UCross, and we were all working inside when the news came over the radio that the US military had invaded Iraq. So while I was outside to kind of process this news and clear my mind again, I literally stepped over practically on a nest of snakes that were wriggling about in the early spring sun. So, like a good researcher, I grabbed my camera rather than running it away and just got a lot of great shots of all these snakes, probably gopher snakes, but I didn't stick around to examine Mom wherever she was.
Right.
And then, some months later, I decided that a grid out of the snakes and their environment, presented in a very equitable, randomly spaced manner, would be a good and honest reminder of my experience that day, of how the place looked, and how things can go unnoticed if we don't look closely. So to me, this piece has always reminded me of UCross, and as well as the start of that military conflict But above all, it's about paying attention, trying to make meaning and understand meaning out of what, where we find ourselves, and accepting things as they come.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. This is a piece that our docents really like to tour, because I think there are so many different ways to interpret it. Which brings me to, I guess, an interesting segue as to how you are redefining the traditional landscape in doing works like this, and how you're trying to transcend or subvert the images that we're so used to with the foreground, background, idealized scenery, and how you decided to just throw it out and start fresh. So
part of that has to do with, I think, when I got my training. And I was in art school and graduate school in Claremont in a very conceptual time. There were not a lot of object making taking
okay.
place. But my love and my approach to art making, in addition to the cerebral, has always been a physical one as well. I'm very, very strongly connected to my hand-eye impulse. I love physical mark making. Yet I have always felt compelled to connect with audience and be someone who poses questions as well as tries to answer them. So when I found myself drawn to approaching landscape imagery, partly because of environmental concerns, partly due to my displacement as a Midwesterner, finding myself out in the far West, I was somewhat horrified to learn as an early artist in Los Angeles area, what a truly disrespected, horrible reputation landscape imagery has in contemporary art. Now, I think that has changed somewhat, but it is still not really where the cool kids hang out, if you know what I'm saying. Artists that have a lot of vigorous intellectual questions they want to pursue tend to avoid the scenic or anything that might be considered as soft imagery or comforting imagery, or in this case, the pastoral. So as I became more aware of my own impulses and why I felt I needed to secure and protect permission for myself to explore those things, I became a better defender. I became a better artist and a more thorough researcher in trying to understand what artists had done before me, what people were doing now that both intersected with or made my work impossible. So I was basically looking for a way to let my imagery and my inquiries be seen, trying to get them to be seen, because many, many landscape images, regardless of the sincere passion that their artist creators have, many images are practically interchangeable. And I would go so far as to say, sometimes when you're looking at an image, you don't even know when or where it was made, because artists tend to take on that mantle of, quote, timelessness. But for me, living in these times with these circumstances, I personally don't find that a sustainable or a responsible position. So it's one I've rejected for myself, although obviously there are many, many artists trying to, make work they find truthful. But for me, it has to pass, this checklist of, can you tell when it was made? Is it about something other than how I personally am inspired by nature? That's another phrase I pretty much hate.
Sure.
you know, life is inspiring, but to just be inspired by nature and not reveal a position, I don't think is moving us forward, moving our world forward, or even the art conversation forward. So I'm always trying to challenge myself to add more layers of opportunity, or not even necessarily critique, but I just want it to be something more than that pretend view out of the pretend window of the picture frame.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I think that's a great statement. I think that artists really are trying to find what suits them, and it sounds like you found that you found what really inspires you.
It's hard to keep fine tuning it though, and not just stay on the channel, you know, on which I've landed, that's been comfortable or worked for a while. So for me to exchange those small, finely painted, very smooth surface paintings for what I'm doing now has been an interesting learning curve. Sometimes I have to step back and really dig to try and understand, well, what did I learn, or what am I learning, or am I still just at the beginning of this, you know, tunnel?
Right. Well, no, it's a continual learning process, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, if one stays engaged, definitely. And so that's one of the reasons I think painting has taken, you know, a backseat. Painting is still happening, but I'm definitely processing a lot mentally, and I often need to have a vision of a direction. You know, where am I going with this, or what am I aiming for, even if I don't know how it's going to turn out or how it's going to look. So right now the burlap is helping. It's a very humble material, very difficult to paint on, you know, a rough weave. And the scale is taking me outside of my head. I mean, they're more physical than ever.
Oh,
So that
yeah.
helps. And I think the work I did the last few years with the powdered pigments and the asphalt has also helped bring me to this place where I am intentionally welcoming in difficulties into the making of the paintings, into the construction of the paintings. So that's letting me solve technical problems while I'm musing on the intellectual and mental problems of what these paintings are about.
Right. Yeah, I can only imagine what it would be like to paint on burlap. I mean, that must really be a process.
It's pretty bad. The learning curve was, you know, about like the quarantine, the COVID curve. I finally have learned that spare no expense, spare no time on the preparation of the surface. So I'm using a lot of gesso, a lot of acrylic paint in the first several hundred hours of the piece. And then when it gets saturated enough, it is a suitable time to bring out the oil paints and, you know, finesse it a little bit. So it's part of that surprise I want to provide too, that I'm painting on this lumpy stuff, but there are still some very, very lovely passages when you're least expecting it.
Sure. Yeah, I look forward to seeing these works on burlap.
Yeah,
So,
I'll let you know.
yeah. So, I mean, what is your creative process like when you determine what kind of work you would like to do? How do you go step one to final?
I would say that varies quite a bit, depending on if there are things on the calendar, if I know that I'm going to be adding to a pre-existing conversation that I might have with an audience or an institution or a gallery partner, versus when I'm truly starting from scratch. When I'm in the real raw R&D phase, anything could be the item that starts the percolation. It could be receiving some oddball materials. You know, I have a friend who's always finding stuff for me. She'll call me because she's, you know, got a truckload of plywood doors she found on the street, or rolls of canvas. Somebody else recently gave me 2 or 3 milk crates of different jars of powdered mineral pigments. You know, just incredible stuff that people, you know, tend to call me because they know I've got space and an inclination to do, you know, secret experiments.
Yeah, try
So
these different things.
So I'm working with some of that stuff right now. It doesn't always make it into a finished sequence or a finished conversation, but since I don't really have anything scheduled right now, I am doing a lot of experimentation. The last 2 or 3 exhibits that were going to be on the calendar are indefinitely postponed. So that work is done. Some of it, you know, some of it's already sitting in the intended exhibition space. Everything has not been rescheduled yet. So those are all conversations. For whatever reason, my personal makeup, I have set those conversations aside for the time being because I feel they've been interrupted and I don't know where those are going to go yet. That work is done. That conversation, that venue might be very different when we all revisit.
Right.
So the things that I'm doing now, they feel very private. I'm also sending a lot of little things in the mail to people. One of my gallerists said, "Oh my God, I didn't know you were doing airbrush." I'm like, well, it was just a little, you know, just a little
Oh,
scrap of something I was trying out. And, you know, there's a lot of freedom in that to kind of use friends and colleagues as like a test group to see if they even believe it's something I made, because some of it has quite a wide-ranging personality.
Hey, that's okay. You're allowed to experiment.
I figure I'm the boss of me, right?
Yeah.
Especially now when nobody can come in here. That was a roundabout answer to your question, but I seem to operate very differently if I'm working for the near calendar, the far calendar, or just in my own head. And right now, all those chapters feel more separated than they usually do.
Yeah. Yeah. I can understand that. Yeah.
When I told you thank you for giving me a small homework assignment, I really meant it, because probably a month or 2 went by before my first curatorial colleague reached out with a project for his museum in Riverside. And it was like the first time I had been like engaging with somebody besides my dog or my husband in almost 2 months. So that was kind of fun. And now it seems like other institutions are, you know, trying to bring our community back to the surface for some air. And it's not like it was, but it is encouraging to know that the community is still alive.
That's right. And, you know, museums are trying to get back on board and creating, you know, social media platforms and ways to get the collections out to people who can't come through the doors of the museums, the physical museums. And so, yeah, that's why you and I are talking.
Well, I appreciate the effort that you're making at Tucson to bring us together again. It's a substitute, but it's what we've got right now.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So is there anything that you would like to talk about? Any future projects? Anything on your mind?
I would say no. I'm doing the best emotionally if I'm staying in the present. And the more I look to the future, that's not going as well for me right now. So I'm just trying to be with these things that I'm trying, sending out a lot of mail, um, trying to think of ways to connect in this new reality. I guess I feel very uncertain about what the new reality or reopened reality is going to be. But I do trust science, and I'm waiting for some answers and a vaccine, and hope we can get back to our social life again. One thing that occurred to me is that the art world is just really one big bar. I mean, people like to go out and be together and talk about stuff and express ourselves through how we, dress and everything. It's very visual, very social world. So, I'm still grieving the loss of that, but I hope it's still out there. And as I mentioned to you before we went live here, I do want to give you a spin around the studio so you can see what's keeping me company
Yes.
and get a sense of really how big this crazy burlap furious garden Three Sisters is. So let's see if I can do it.
Okay.
I'm gonna spin in the chair. You can also see my fabulous studio.
Oh, that is a fabulous studio, I have to say.
So there it is.
Wow.
So it goes way up.
Oh my goodness, Karen, you've outdone yourself on this.
I'm making extra panels because the original one wasn't big enough. So now here we've got, let's see. So there's like piles of rotting squash in the studio and big shacks of dried corn. And I think I'm going to have one with the queens of the night, my tropical night blooming cactus. There's going to be a lot of different gardens.
Oh, okay. I really like this series you have going.
So I still need museum walls because they're big, although they do roll up. So that's good.
That's always a plus.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you today. And I hope that more museum colleagues reach out to you because it sounds like you have a lot going on with this new large panel burlap series you have going on. Lots of fun. And, we will make it through. We just need to be patient, right?
That's right. And eat cookies.
Yes, eat cookies. You got it.
Christine.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.